Hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. Happy St. Patrick's Day. It is St. Patrick's Day as I am recording this. As you can see, I have my green on. I accidentally I wore my Guinness t-shirt yesterday. I have a dog named Guinness, so of course anything with a Guinness logo is appealing to me. But so today I am wearing my Guinness t-shirt with my Guinness on it. Just my little nod to the day. So I had a really good time doing the video last week about the best women writers according to Google search. I had a lot of fun doing that, got some pretty good comments. People seemed to enjoy that as well. So I wanted to do something like that again for St. Patrick's Day. So I thought, well, why not look at the best Irish writers, see how many of those I have read. I'm willing to bet it's not going to be as good. But I also had a sneaking suspicion that if I just did a Google search for the best Irish writers, there would be some weird results. So I tested it out, and sure enough, one of the first results in my Google search was Colin Farrell, who is not a writer. And I even looked at some of the profiles that came up as well, and some of them were Scottish. So it wasn't going to work. So I was trying to think, well, what's a way I can do this that would be fun? And I noticed that one of the very first search results was an article from Oprah's O Magazine entitled 25 Books by Irish Authors You Should Read. So if you watched my video about the best women writers, you know Oprah made a random cameo in that. I'm sure because of her book club, she shows up in the search results for Google a lot, which means she shows up in their algorithms as a writer. So anyway, I thought that would be fun because it kind of takes us full circle from the one video to this one. By the way, I will link that video down below. Now, before I start this article, it's a gallery I have not worked my way through, but I have seen the first one on it, just because I feel like that spontaneity factor is kind of fun. But before I do that, I want to mention I did a poll on my channel in the community tab about who your favorite Irish authors or what your favorite Irish books are. If you have not voted in that, feel free, journey over to the tab, let me know. At the end of this video, I will loop back around to that and look at some of the responses. I posted it earlier today. I think there are at least a handful of results to run through, but let's start with the 25 books by Irish authors you should read. I'm gonna try to do this a little quickly, so we'll see how this goes. So the first one is Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney, which is actually something I talked about fairly recently in a book haul revisit. I will link the book haul revisit down below as well, because I talk a little more at length about my opinion of this book. So if you want to know, check out that video down below. And basically, I thought it was fine. I think Sally Rooney is an incredible author. In terms of like structure and what she does behind the scenes, I just didn't really respond to the story. I have not read Normal People yet, but I have read Conversations with Friends, which is the one that is on this article from O Magazine, which is dated March 2nd, 2021. So it's even new. So Normal People was out there, but they are specifically referring to Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney and not Normal People. Now we're going into uncharted territory. I haven't seen the rest of the list. And if it's a book I'm unfamiliar, which I feel like with 24 other Irish books and authors, it's probably going to happen that I'm unfamiliar. So the blurbs are really short, so I may rely on those. We'll see what happens. So the second one is A Week in Winter by Maeve Binchy. I've heard of Maeve Binchy, but I've never read any of her books. I think she wrote Circle of Friends, which was turned into a movie in the 90s that I never saw. I'm going to be honest with you. The reason I've never read Maeve Binchy is that when I was working at Borders, she was a very popular author. A lot of people came in looking for her books. They were excited when she released a new book. She was very marketed as like a women's fiction writer. And me in my early 20s was just like, no, thank you. I would probably revisit now because like I said, I've heard really good things about her as a writer. It's just that would be my impression based on the way things were marketed at the time. And that's probably really not fair. So the one I specifically recommend here is A Week in Winter. I have not heard of that one. Apparently it was her last novel before she died in 2012, set in a village in Ireland where the protagonist opens a holiday hotel as a safe haven for guests and natives. That sounds cute. Like I said, I've heard really good things about her writing over the years, so she is somebody I would be willing to try. Apparently A Week in Winter is a good place to start, so maybe I would look at that one. The next book is Maeve in America, Essays by a Girl from Somewhere Else by Maeve Higgins. Maeve Higgins is familiar that name. So she's an Irish comedian. Okay, I know where I know her from. So I was a huge fan of the podcast Two Dope Queens, which is a comedy podcast. So basically what they would do is they would do comedy shows and then turn the comedy show into a podcast episode. And Maeve Higgins, I believe, was in 2 episodes. She was really funny in both of her appearances. I had no idea she had produced a book. So that's interesting. Apparently this is... It mines humor from her caught between worlds perspective. She moved to New York at the age of 31, but is Irish, and has insights about ambition, America, haplessness, and homesickness, among other topics that will stay with you and make you laugh. Well, she was very funny on Two Dope Queens, so I would definitely be curious in checking that one out, because she had a very quirky and interesting way of thinking about the world, so I can see where she would be a very fascinating writer. The next one I should have seen coming. It's Tana French, Faithful Place. Confession time. I have never read a Tana French book. I know, I can feel your judgment radiating through. I know. I feel like at this point, her writing has been so built up that there's a little bit of a hype factor. I feel like it's only going to lead to disappointment, or I'm going to feel weird if all these people like her books and I don't. Which is totally fine anyway. You know, I'm fine with being the cheese that stands alone. But I don't know. It feels like her books have been really built up. And that is now the hurdle that I need to get over. So I've heard mixed things about, what is it? Into the Woods or In the Woods? Into the Woods is Sondheim. So I think it's In the Woods by Tana French. So let me know. If you've read Tana French, is it worth me taking the leap? Is Faithful Place a good place to start, or would you recommend another one? If you've read Tana French and have opinions about it, please put it in the comment section down below. Let me know. Okay, we are up to number 5 of 25. I'm going to have to pick up the pace a little bit. Dubliners by James Joyce. I've never read James Joyce either. I feel like I'm really intimidated to try one of his books. I used to have a copy of Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, but I don't anymore. At least I don't think so. I used to have a really pretty copy of that because I felt like Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man was a good access point for James Joyce. Ulysses really intimidates me. I feel like that would take a lot. It scares me. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know anything about Dubliners. Apparently it's a short story collection, so maybe that would be an easier place. Again, if you've read James Joyce, let me know in the comment section down below what might be a good starting point for him. And maybe I'll think about taking a chance in the future. Next, we have Brooklyn by Colm Tóibín, I believe is how you pronounce his name. I'm not sure. Sorry if that's wrong. I have never read a Colm Tóibín book, and I really wanted to. Douglas Stewart, who wrote Shuggie Bain, recommended one of his books, and I can't think of the title of it right now, as an LGBTQ book to explore. I have seen the movie Brooklyn, and I liked the movie. I do feel like that is something that would be better in book form because it would kind of expand on a lot of the themes in the movie in ways that a movie just kind of can't for timing purposes, and because so much of a book can be interior and it's really hard to reflect that in a movie. So I enjoyed it, but that's the only way I have engaged in any of Colm Tóibín's work, and I really need to get around to that because I've heard so many good things about him and about his work. So he's one I definitely need to try. Next, A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing by Eimear McBride. I hope I pronounced that correctly. The cover of it in particular looks familiar. I feel like this is something I saw maybe last year, maybe the year before, showing up on social media, and I haven't gotten around to. Apparently she is in the same ballpark as Samuel Beckett, James Joyce, and William Faulkner. Those are heavy, heavy ways to compare an author. None of the characters have names, and the setting is not clearly defined beside the fact that it takes place in Ireland, but the narrator's language is blazing and inventive. That sounds intimidating, so I don't know about that. If you have thoughts, again, comment section down below. Next is Milkman by Anna Burns, Booker Prize winner. I have heard very mixed things about this book, and from a lot of the feedback, I'm not convinced it would be something that I like. I feel like it's something I should try at some point, but it's a little bit low on my priority list. I feel like there are other books I would prioritize first. It is something I would want to try. I think really deep, active reads that require participation on the part of the reader are good, and I've heard that this is kind of that book, or that style of book. But again, I feel like from a lot of the feedback, I don't know that it would be worth the effort because I'm not sure I would like it. So it's definitely low on my priority list, although maybe someday. What do we have next? The Barrytown Trilogy by Roddy Doyle. This is actually 3 books. Oh, Oprah, you're cheating. But after reading one book in Roddy Doyle's vivid and lively trilogy focusing on the Rabbit family, you'll want to read them all. The 80s set trilogy was adapted into a series of equally lovable movies. The commitments in particular will have you humming. I've never heard of these books. I have heard of Roddy Doyle. I've heard good things about him, but I am totally unfamiliar with the trilogy. Maybe it could be fun. Next, we have The Glorious Heresies by Lisa McInerney. The Glorious Heresies is a crime novel unlike one you've read before. For proof, look at the inciting incident. A grandmother accidentally kills an intruder with a holy stone, a religious artifact. Well, that is interesting. The rest of the black comedy follows Maureen Phelan and the other residents of her Cork housing estate who have to deal with the repercussions. That could be interesting. I've never heard of the author, never heard of the book, but that inciting incident does kind of grab your attention, doesn't it? Next, From a Low and Quiet Sea by Donal Ryan. A Syrian refugee trapped on a Mediterranean island, a nursing home bus driver, an older Irishman who regrets his past. Donal Ryan gets into these characters' heads as they reach tragic impasses, and then he intertwines their stories in this globe-spanning, empathetic book. Well, that sounds really good. I have never heard of Donal Ryan before, but that does sound very interesting. And funnily enough, I'm looking at the cover right now, and there's a quote from Roddy Doyle, so we're definitely sticking within the wheelhouse of the other books on this list. Okay, next is Skippy Dies by Paul Murray. I have read this one. Felt like we had a bit of a lull there. I read the first one and then none. And this is number 12 of 25. So I have read this. I thought it was fine. I know there are a lot of people who really love this book. I will say there are mostly men who like this book. But I felt like it was fine. It was amusing. I don't remember most of it. I remember it's set in a boarding school. I remember that it's kind of the incidents leading up to and then after the event of the title. But, you know, I kind of thought it was fine. And that's all I can really say about it. Number 13 of 25, The Country Girls by Edna O'Brien. Edna O'Brien's 1950s set trilogy follows 2 friends and polar opposites after they graduate from their stifling convent education. The Country Girls was both lauded and critiqued for its unflinching portrayal of women breaking from tradition. That does sound really interesting. I'm looking at this is 3 books again. Oprah, you cheeky little cheater. What is going on? I have heard of Edna O'Brien. I've heard really good things. One of her recent books had sort of an own voices controversy attached to it, if I remember correctly. But I've never read one of her books, and I've heard really good things. So this could be a very interesting one to... Well, it's not one book. It's a trilogy. Do I want to commit to a trilogy? If you have read Edna O'Brien, let me know down below. Is this where I should start, or should I go somewhere else? Because I think that is an author that I would definitely like to try at some point. And this has an introduction from Eimear McBride. So yeah, we're definitely staying within the family as we work through this list. 14, The Wonder by Emma Donoghue. I have read Room, but that's the only book by Emma Donoghue that I have read. I've heard good things about some of the other ones. I just have never gotten around to any of them. So this one is set in an Irish village in 1859. An event happens that some call a miracle and others call a hoax. A young girl survives weeks without food. An English nurse named Libright is sent to the village to investigate and ends up in over her head. That sounds interesting. I didn't really know what this book was about. So I have considered reading other books by Emma Donoghue. So maybe this would be a good one to look at next. Okay, number 15, Amongst Women by John McGahern. Never heard of it. John McGahern's award-winning book is a portrait of a family held under the sway of its moody patriarch, Michael Moran, an aging Irish Republican Army vet who took a tyrannical approach to raising his 5 children. That does sound like it could be interesting. I feel like the IRA is something that I don't know a whole lot about. They definitely did not teach it in schools in America. And I feel like I've been kind of catching up as an adult. I should really read that book, Say Nothing. I haven't gotten around to that yet. So, and I know Milkman deals with that as well. So maybe one of the two would probably, this seems like the one that would immediately be more appealing, but I don't know anything about it. So I feel like I would have to look it up and seek out a couple more reviews because it's entirely new to me. Next is The Last September by Elizabeth Bowen. The Last September is a classic novel about a girl coming of age during a formative moment in Irish history, the Irish War of Independence. The daughter of wealthy Anglo-Irish aristocrats, Lois watches as the sun sets on her way of life. That does sound like it could be really interesting, and I don't know a whole lot of Irish history, so that could be a good way of introducing. I might have to do a little more research on the side, but maybe I just need, reading a book like this would just be the kick in the pants that I would need to do that. So it could be interesting. But again, I've never heard of it, never heard of Elizabeth Bowen, so I would have to seek out some more reviews. 17, Actress by Anne Enright. I actually had this from my library last year. I got it from my library right before lockdown started. And as lockdown started, I started feeling really stressed out, and my reading really slowed down for about a month. And I ended up not getting to it, and I just, when my library started accepting returns again, I just gave it back. And I do feel like, I do kind of regret that, is what I'm trying to say. Because it was something that I thought sounded interesting. It's about a mother who is an actress, of course, and her daughter, and it has that kind of Hollywood angle. I think it had something of like an All About Eve aspect to it. I could be wrong about that. I'm not going to read the blurb, but that is something I would like to read. I have not read Anne Enright's Booker Prize winning book. What was that? The Gathering? But I've heard good things about that. I heard it was really depressing, but good. Next is Exciting Times by Naoise Dolan. This was just longlisted for the Women's Prize. And Naoise Dolan, according to the blurb, has been compared to Sally Rooney, another prominent millennial Irish writer, but her voice is entirely unique. So this is about an Irish person who moves to Hong Kong, and like a young Irish woman who moves to Hong Kong and is having trouble adapting to life there. It does sound like a book that would be interesting. I think what I mentioned in my Women's Prize long list reaction video was that it is something I probably want to hear a little bit more about. It sounds interesting, but there are other books I might want to get to first. Number 19, P.S. I Love You by Cecilia Ahern. This was a movie, right? With Hilary Swank, I think. My husband keeps threatening to make me watch it, saying that it will make me cry. So you may have seen the 2007 drama P.S. I Love You featuring Hilary Swank and Jared Butler, but the sad love story gets its origins from Cecilia Ahern's 2005 novel of the same name. So, I don't know. I feel like if I was going to do anything, I'd probably watch the movie, but I've known my husband for 11 years at this point and still haven't watched the movie. So maybe take a pass on that one. Number 20, Angela's Ashes. I used to own a copy of this. It disappeared somewhere along the way. It does feel like something I really need to get around to, because it's supposed to be really, really depressing, but also really, really good. And yeah, I mentioned that it's a memoir, and I mentioned that I don't know a whole lot about Irish history. It's not taught in schools. It's at least not any of the schools I went to here in America. So I feel like there's a lot of catching up, and this could be a good way to do that. So this might be a good candidate for audio, actually. I'm gonna have to think about that. Next, The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I've read plays, or a play by Oscar Wilde, but I have never read this book, and I really need to get around to it. I've heard kind of mixed things, but you know, who doesn't love Oscar Wilde? He's kind of an outsized character, a very interesting figure in history, something of a tragic figure in history. So I would love to read his book, his novel, in addition to the one play. I read The Importance of Being Earnest. And I saw the film adaptation of An Ideal Husband in the late 90s with Rupert Everett. Don't remember a whole lot about it, and I have not read the play. Number 22, The Sea by John Banville. This is a Booker Prize winner. I have read it. Maybe this is something I should revisit, because what year did this come out? It doesn't say. But I want to say it was sometime around maybe 2005, maybe 2007, somewhere in that zip code. And I would have been in my early to mid-20s at that point, and I remember thinking it was fine, not quite getting why it won an award, but I have heard really good things about it in the years since then. So maybe this is something I need to revisit now that I'm a little older and hopefully wiser. I don't know. I don't know if I can make that claim, but that might be something worth a revisit. Number 23, The Heart's Invisible Furies by John Boyne. I love that book. I really did not like the other book by John Boyne that I read, which was The Ladder to the Sky. John Boyne himself has been a little bit of a controversial character. I've seen some interviews where he said some things that were just kind of like, oh, really? Okay. I read The Heart's Invisible Furies before I knew any of that. So I did enjoy this book. It was my favorite book of the year that I read it. And it's a coming of age tale that follows the life of the protagonist. It jumps every 7 years in each chapter. And it tells the life story of its protagonist as he comes of age in a very Catholic country and eventually ends up in a country that is a little bit, not necessarily liberal, but certainly more accepting of the changing attitudes. And I really enjoyed it a lot. It had a sort of darkly humorous side to it. It's the way I describe it is that it's Roald Dahl meets Charles Dickens. If either of those authors sounds appealing to you, I would recommend The Heart's Invisible Furies. I liked it. I haven't liked anything else that I've engaged with that had to do with John Boyne, but what are you going to do? All right, second to last one. Pond by Claire Louise Bennett. The protagonist of Claire Louise Bennett's novel would probably judge you if she could. As it stands, her relentless critical eye makes for a daring, surprising read. Living alone in Western Ireland, she makes a study of the minutiae of her daily life to avoid looking inwards. I feel like I've seen this book pop up now and again. I don't remember a whole lot about it or what the feedback was. I feel like the feedback was kind of mixed. There's a blurb on the cover from the Oprah magazine, so definitely keeping it in the family on this one. I think the reason I don't remember a lot of the feedback is that I wasn't very interested in it based on what I was hearing. The final one is Unraveling Oliver by Liz Nugent. Never heard of it. Never heard of Liz Nugent. Let's see. If you're in the mood for a creepy nighttime read, look no further than Liz Nugent's Unraveling Oliver, which taps into the mind of a sociopath. Through the clever use of flashbacks, Nugent retraces the steps that led to the titular character, Oliver Ryan, to lose his grip with reality and murder his wife. That sounds like it could be interesting, but it also sounds like it could fall into all of those traps of like mystery thrillers right now that I'm not a huge fan of, like unreliable narrators, kind of twists and turns and things like that. So it could be something I would be really interested in, but it could also very much not be something. So I would have to seek out more about this, but it does grab my attention based on that little blurb. So those are the 25 books Oprah recommends you try that are Irish. Let's check in really quickly with the community poll I did on my page. So in honor of St. Patrick's Day, who are your favorite Irish authors and what are your favorite Irish books? Kurt Anderson says, I have to go with Oscar Wilde, but more for the man he was than the work he's most known for. That's fair. Oscar Wilde is one of the most quotable people who has ever lived, and his work can be a little bit up and down. So I absolutely agree with that. And part of the reason I want to read The Picture of Dorian Gray is really because to support Oscar Wilde very much after the fact, because he's been dead for a while. But that is exactly what to me seems appealing about Oscar Wilde. So I get it. Bob the Bookerer says, Colm, Tóibín, and Enright are authors I'm slowly getting very into. I really need to get to Colm Tóibín. I really do. And Anne Enright is also someone I need to catch up with. But Colm Tóibín, for sure, is an author I really need to read. D. Kwan says, Joyce, A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. Currently reading and enjoying Dubliners. Yeah, I used to have a copy of Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, and I don't anymore. So that's frustrating. But I'm glad to hear that this person is enjoying Dubliners, because maybe that is a good entry point. Again, let me know what you think if you have read James Joyce in the comment section down below. Okay, She Reads says, Maeve Binchy. Okay, so yeah, Maeve Binchy is definitely an author I need to reconsider and revisit, because I also think it's really important to reconsider your first impressions of a novelist over time. I've heard really good things about her books, and I shouldn't hold, I feel like the women's fiction, creating genres for things like that, it doesn't really make sense. So I would absolutely be interested in reading Maeve Binchy. And the final one for now is Fredo Gumbo, who says John Banville. And like I said, The Sea is definitely something I feel like I should revisit. I don't really know much about his other books. I know for a while he was writing mystery thriller books under a pseudonym, and I think Benjamin Black? And eventually, I think he started doing them under his own name. I could be wrong about that. It was very well known that he was writing mystery books under a pseudonym. So he's an author I probably do need to get to know more as well. And if you have other recommendations, you can either put them in the comment section down below here, or just pop on over to the community tab and let me know on that. It's not, I said it's a poll. It's not, it's just a post. Leave a comment here or there, letting me know what your favorite Irish authors or Irish books are. Look forward to all the feedback. If you have thoughts on any of these books, I would love to hear that as well. If further recommendations, anything, you know, how are you celebrating St. Patrick's Day? Do you celebrate? To me, I don't, because I'm not a big drinker at all. So what is there for me to do on St. Patrick's Day? But anyway, I will leave it there. As always, I really appreciate your time. I will be back. Until next time, happy St. Patrick's Day and happy reading.